Planning to attend GTIA's ChannelCon 2026 conference in San Diego? Well, first off, if not, why not? ChannelCon is where the IT channel convenes for real conversations, real deals, and real growth. Fueled by GTIA's trusted, unbiased insights and a community that amplifies every connection, ChannelCon gives MSPs and everyone else in the channel the education, peer-driven strategies, and practical tools they need to move faster and stay ahead. Because your growth is GTIA's only agenda item. And, in addition, ChannelCon is where your MSP chat friends Eric Simpson and Rich Freeman will be podcasting from in person. Come find us on Podcast Row and say hello. We'd love to meet you face to face. ChannelCon 2026 is in San Diego, August 3rd to August 5th, and you can learn more about it at channelcon.gtia.org. And now, on to the show. And 3, 2, 1, blast off. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the MSP Chat Podcast, your weekly visit with two talking heads talking with you about the services, strategies, and success tips you need to make it big in managed services. My name is Rich Freeman. I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm also Chief Analyst at Channel Master, the organization responsible for this show. I am joined side by side virtually by your other co-host, our CEO and Chief Strategist at Channel Master, Eric Simpson. Eric, how you doing?
Doing well, Rich, doing well. Temperatures are holding steady in the upper 80s here in SoCal, but we just talked a little bit behind in the green room, and you said it's a little less warm this week in Seattle where you are.
About 14, 15 degrees cooler, apparently, than what you were experiencing right now. But then again, as I always point out, you've got air conditioning and I don't. So it's probably just about right for both of us.
Understood. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's it's this phenomenon, rising temperatures all over the planet. The other thing that's kind of cool here in SoCal is the US Open for surfing is happening down here at Huntington Beach. So a lot of beach goers are enjoying the sunshine and the surf here in SoCal.
That sounds like fun. Are you going to go yourself?
I'm not going to go, but Riley's been a couple times. So, he's my proxy.
Okay. Well, yeah, he'll tell us all about it. In the meantime, let us dive into our story of the week, which comes to us from the world of security. And this is based on a recent post on Channelholic, my blog, that in a kind of sort of way poses the riddle, when is a platform not a platform? And the answer is increasingly in the security space when it is an old school platform. So let me set this up a little bit. Platforms obviously are nothing new in the world of security. We've been talking about that here on the show. I've been writing about it on Channelholic forever. A set of reasons why platforms really have come to dominate security. I mean, from the standpoint of either a partner or an end user, a buyer. It is fewer vendor relationships to juggle. It's one bill. It's one throat to choke. But more importantly, it's also better security outcomes when you have a set of integrated tools that are sharing signals with one another and coordinating activities with one another. You are going to get better security. So for a number of reasons, platformization, as it's sometimes called, has been a trend in the security world for a while. What has changed more recently, though, is, of course, AI and its impact on the threat landscape, where basically you are seeing a whole new range of threats, faster moving threats, unpredictable threats, threats that are harder to match with previous patterns and behaviors. If there's anything that has happened in the headlines recently to kind of point out how novel and fast and dangerous AI-driven security threats are, just look at what happened with OpenAI and Hugging Face. And that wasn't even really an attack. That wasn't a threat actor. That's the kind of thing that on a smaller, less frightening scale is going on already. And we're going to see more and more of that. And what happens there is that the integrations platforms have relied on before are increasingly inadequate to deal with that kind of threat landscape. What you don't just need a set of tools to be sharing signals with one another and taking action based on that shared intelligence. What you really need in order to act on AI-powered threats is a single foundation, a common data layer that everything is drawing off of, and a common code foundation, essentially, that all of these tools are connected to, so that they are all interpreting the signal at the same time and coming up with a remediation plan for dealing with it if it is legitimately a threat as a single entity instead of a set of separate entities, which brings us to Sophos. So there are other security vendors in the industry that have recognized what I just said and have been moving there. And now Sophos is the latest of those. Sophos has been in the platform game for a long time, Eric. The earliest incarnation of their platform goes back to 2011 and something called Sophos Cloud. What they have been talking about up until very recently, though, is they have a suite of products that share what Sophos has long called a security heartbeat. And this is trading signals, right? So if the endpoint protection module sees a compromised device, it tells the firewall isolates that device. Integrations, coordination, as a Sophos executive I interviewed said, useful but narrow. That is not what's going to enable you to recognize and act on AI-powered threats. To do that, you need not a collection of products that are trading signals, but essentially a single entity, a single platform that is seeing all that at once and coming up with a plan of action based on that at once and executing that plan of action. What you need to do is take this suite of products that Sophos offers and fuse it, which is, of course, why the new platform from Sophos is called Fusion. That is what they have done. They have architecturally rewritten the Sophos platform, said it is one data layer, one basically core foundation of security functionality, all working in tandem. So that they are now part of this new platform trend, pointing out, of course, the degree to which old platforms are going to be increasingly at risk for all the reasons that we've discussed here. And so for that reason, to the extent that the familiar names in security that people hear, the Fortinets and the checkpoints and the to the degree that those companies aren't already doing what Sophos is doing now, they will all be doing that as well, increasingly over time for the same reason. And other platforms out there are going to have to think about what this means for them and the viability of their architecture and their offering.
It's interesting, Rich. I mean, it makes logical sense that if you're just, if you're architecting something from the ground up foundationally that integrates everything at that core code level, you're going to have lots of benefits, right? From security to reporting to identifying patterns and taking action and maybe eliminating lag and things like that, and having a little bit more granular control over rights and permissions and things like that. So I guess my thoughts drift towards the other vendors that are going to need to move in this direction, which I think it makes logical sense that they all will at some point. The way they sit today, then, and this is something for MSPs to think about as well. Now I'm thinking about, if you're stitching together your own bespoke, best in class cybersecurity solution, as many of us like to do, Rich, right? Some of us say, well, we might have a good, better, best kind of an offering, and our good offering may have a little bit more of a platform, but our best offering is something that we feel is, these distinct parts. They're good. We want to take the best of all these things and then integrate them ourselves, maybe through some APIs, and then deliver them to our clients. Well, it sounds like, taking the lesson that you kind of referred to with OpenAI and Hugging Face, that these threat actors are going to unleash, and they're already unleashing AI and trying to penetrate each of these individual components. So we're talking about a supply chain risk, right? So if you've got 4 vendors that comprise your cybersecurity solution, and these threat actors are able to penetrate one of those vendors, then because they're integrated through these APIs, that's how they gain entry. So I'm just thinking about that and thinking about, how alarmed MSPs should be feeling right now, and what they should think about in terms of, okay, what's my strategy as I evolve and harden my my deliverables to match the threat level. So that's the one thing. And the second thing is, how do I have that conversation with clients that says, we're going to do these things because the threats are so large, we're going to need more budget, and you need to say yes now.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, the first point there is a really, really good one, and it's not. I wish I had addressed that actually in my column in retrospect now, because you're right. There are a lot of MSPs who very much believe in constructing their own security stack with a set of what they believe to be best in class tools, and I really think there is. I'm not going to say that nobody should be doing that anymore, but there are some pretty legit questions to ask about whether or not that is viable. And is there any component within your custom stack that has enough breadth of signal and response to deal with these AI threats the way that a platform of the kind we've been talking about can? It's a very good question, actually, that people, MSPs in particular, really need to be thinking about. And then, yeah, and I mean, I don't know if the rise of these fused platforms, let's call them right now, necessitates a budget conversation with customers, but absolutely the AI threatscape does. And again, the headlines are continually giving us reasons, excuses for MSPs to go back to customers who decline to make the spending commitments and the budget commitments they made in the past. Look, if you don't believe me, look at this. Look at what is happening.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, you really need to get on this, even if it's going to cost you some more.
Yeah. No, fair pushback on the point about, more budget. And I guess what I should have said was, well, for a lot of MSPs, Rich, we know that a lot of their clients aren't yet even trued up to what their good cybersecurity portfolio is. So I guess I was in my mind, assuming that that the landscape is, you got MSPs that have clients that are, your best clients. They're doing what you want them to do. They're paying for that. You've got your B clients that are, on the way to doing that. You're not having much very difficult conversation with those folks, but it's a work in progress. And then you've got some legacy customers that, just aren't quick to change and adapt and move. And then we get into the conversation about how MSPs care more about their clients' businesses than they do sometimes, and that becomes a challenge trying to get them to do what's right so the MSP and their clients can sleep better at night.
Well, let's move on to your tip of the week here, Eric. And I think in theory, I think you're going to be touching on something that in theory everybody subscribes to, which is the idea that you want your business continually improving and improving every quarter. In fact, what you're going to be talking about is the gap between that aspiration and actually making it happen.
Absolutely, Rich. I mean, we assume that a business, it takes a lot of strategery, as we like to say, to make sure that we are, looking at patterns, looking at trends, and we're identifying the constraints that are preventing the business from growth. And sometimes that list of things that need to be matured or evolved to overcome, growth constraints or other issues, can seem like a really, really long list, right? It's like, oh, we got to boil the ocean. So, what I want to do is bring everybody down into kind of a thought process that says, okay, you've got a long list of things that need to be addressed in your organization. You probably are prioritizing things in the way that you think they should be addressed. So the first thing that I would suggest, Rich, is, are you sure that you're not addressing a symptom of the root issue, right? Because ask more deliberate questions like, if we, what's the ultimate outcome that we want to fix? And is the thing that we feel that we're addressing just a symptom of that? And there are other things that need to be fixed along the way, or is it the root cause of the problem? So that's the first thing. But then the guidance here is once you identify what the root cause of all these issues are and prioritize those, then focus on getting one improved rather than trying to do too many uh, at once. Because I think that's where, and even in my prior life as an MSP, like we were spinning a lot of plates and trying to, work with the limited bandwidth that we had, and then maybe leaning on other, strategic vendor or strategic distributor relationships to help us fix some things, or advisors and things like that. There's a lot of scheduling that has to be done. There's a lot of follow up, and you miss one call, and then things kind of drag on. So work on one first. Like if you haven't really achieved the progress and the improvement that you would like, pick that one KPI. Like what is the one thing that you want to improve? And I'm going to use a KPI because everybody kind of understands what KPIs are. And let's say that you want to improve that KPI by 5% this quarter. So now put a plan together to address that KPI, that most important KPI. It could be a client related issue. It could be a finance related issue. It could be an invoicing related issue, whatever it is, you want to improve that. It may not take you a quarter, but I'm saying focus every part of your energy on addressing that and getting that solved. And the win that you celebrate with the team empowers everybody and brings confidence that, oh, we can achieve these things and we're going to do it in this methodical order. If you can put a framework around that so it's repeatable, then everybody understands what the mission is. You're going to bring them in, the appropriate folks, and we can get behind it and we can solve things. It's a little similar to the EOS methodology, Rich, and we use that at Channel Master, where we pick, several rocks every quarter that we try to address. But I'm talking about for folks that like more than one thing at a time can be overwhelming, or um, maybe you can designate one department to solve their one problem and then give them that support. But don't overload folks, especially in these days where everybody is constrained from bandwidth and resources and things like that. And then after you get that solved, let's have a debrief for everybody. All right, here was the issue. Here's how we solved it. Here were the challenges that we had to overcome. And now here's the result. And then learn from that so that when you put that in place for the next challenge, you're following kind of the same blueprint, if you will. And then celebrate it with the team, right? This is a big win. There's never a lack of things that we should be celebrating with our team and thanking them for the hard work that it takes to build and operate our MSP practices.
I set this up as a conversation about the gap between aspiration and reality with respect to improving the business. And the reason that gap exists is because MSPs are all, as you said, spinning a lot of plates. They're fighting fires. They're working in the business instead of on the business, and it's just in the nature of what it is to be an MSP. And as a result, if you set, 3 goals or four, anything above 3 goals that you want to work on simultaneously, it makes it that much harder to carve out the time and the attention to, diagnose the issue and come up with a plan for remedying it and so on. So I really like the idea of saying, look, let's start with one. We're going to focus on one thing that's going to make a meaningful impact here, and we're going to come up with a plan, and we're going to execute the plan, and we're going to measure the results. And when we see results, we're going to celebrate those, and then we'll move on to the next thing. And over time, maybe you find actually we can do two at a time, and perhaps they're department specific, as you were talking about. But if you have these goals to improve the business quarterly, and you find it difficult to actually realize those goals, this is a good plan of action for beginning to do so. Let's just scope in on something specific and just do that, and then move on from there.
Yeah, and in my experience, Rich, everybody's spinning so many plates. If we give them 3 or 4 more plates to spin on sticks, they're not just going to drop those new ones. They tend to drop few more, right? So, and think about it this way too, because I was just listening to you and processing this. Well, any organization that can improve 4 KPIs by 5% in 1 year, that's super awesome, right? So if you can just get that done, and if you can increase that, fantastic, right? But that's meaningful progress, and it brings the team together, right? In an exercise, everybody should know what we're doing, and and have their role defined, even if it's just, hey, I'm here if you need an additional hour or two. What can I do to help so we can hit this milestone for the organization? And that brings value to the not only the organization, but also if we're increasing our profitability, then there's more rewards to celebrate with the team in terms of bonuses and comp and cool fun outings and things like that.
Okay, fantastic stuff. Folks, we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back on the other side, we're going to be joined by the founder and CEO of a company called IgnitHQ. Now, if you haven't heard of them, that's because it's a very young business, really, only a few months old at this point. And they're basically in the same business as ConnectWise and Kaseya. They are in the managed services suite business. And if you're wondering if the world needs another suite and how you could possibly differentiate one from the ones that are in the market already, stick around for this conversation because the folks at Night HQ have a very particular answer to that question, and it's going to be interesting to see if the market agrees with them or not. So, interesting conversation coming your way very soon after the break. We'll see you then. And welcome back to part two of this episode of the MSP Chat Podcast, our spotlight interview segment, where we're very pleased to be joined by Yaron Baitch. He is, among other things, as we'll get into in a moment, founder and CEO of a company you may or may not have heard of yet, but I'm guessing we'll hear about before too long. It's called IgnitHQ. And it is taking on the likes of ConnectWise and Kaseya head on. This is the newest entrant in the managed services suite space, with a particularly leading edge kind of stance on AI and data and a number of other issues that we want to get into. Yaron, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So, for folks in the audience who have not met you before, I want to talk about Ignite HQ in a moment. But before that, just tell folks a little bit about the other things that you have done and continue to do because you have many hats.
Cool, thank you. Yeah. So, background is MSP from the beginning. So, when MSPs were around and been doing break fix for 20 plus years, changed that model and realized that managed services are really a key component to every small business in the country. Pretty much needs somebody doing IT aside from their nephew or cousin or somebody in the office doing it. And that's what started my career. Was basically I was the nephew coming into an office, doing something in the dental space, and helped grow a practice. And really, it escalated from there. Been involved in a number of MSPs, bought, sold a few over the years. Took a little bit of a hiatus and founded a company that did touchless authentication, was venture backed. Ultimately, our client base was MSPs because again, this is the world I know and live. And then after a few years of going through that, and that ultimately exited to log me in, got back into the MSP space again, and really started to have the pain points that every MSP has in terms of tools, and the tool spread and the lack of unification of data. And said, I have development skills, I have MSP skills. I want to start building something internally. And I really wanted to start getting into the idea of there's an opportunity here without any technical debt of years of acquisition and years of building to build something from the ground up that we want to use internally. And that was the birth of Ignite HQ. And, we really started to just get down and figure out like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to make it so that our tool is unified, and not just unified,
Well,
but has sure,
let's get into that
yeah,
a little bit here. So, and just by the way, you mentioned some experience in the dental world. As I understand it, on the managed services side, you're still kind of specialized there, which might come up a little bit later in
sure,
the conversation as we start
yeah,
talking about delivering AI solutions to customers. Um, but go ahead without turning this into an ad for
of
Ignite.
course,
Go ahead and tell
yeah.
folks who are new to it, what is that product all about?
Yeah, so IgnitHQ is really, if you look at it, it's an operating system for managed services platforms. So basically, everyone has a whole set of tools: your PSA, your RMM, your documentation, your password management, your everything you would do to operate an MSP, your financial components, everything there. And the challenge we've seen in the industry is that there's so many different tools that are connected via APIs or connected with a skin, and then brought on through acquisition. So auto remediation for RMM, or some PSA contract, you know allocations that you're trying to figure out, how many devices are there, and IgnitHQ unifies all that. And IgnitHQ came back with the idea from the get-go was, we're going to have AI native at the database level. So everything is going to be single database, single source of truth. So it's not that you're using an API to connect to a different platform to then look at data and then hopefully bring it back in a unified state. It truly is unified. So no matter what you make a change in, if you're changing an RMM for the number of endpoints, or rules for remediation, to you're changing a contract that says we now are managing 15 endpoints, to creating an SOP that you need your staff to understand, or a KB article for something that they're going to be onboarding, or whatever the tool is, it all lives within the platform natively. And we have an AI layer, which is our AI tool, which is called Duke. And Duke lives within the platform at the database level. So no matter where you are in the platform, Duke is contextually aware. And that's the difference with our platform specifically, is that it's not something that's been bolted on. It's been designed from the ground up. So from an architectural standpoint, it comes in at the base level. And then at the base level, because it has visibility across the whole platform, it allows you to have much more contextual awareness. It's cross corpus. It completely understands everything you're doing inside the platform, and allows you to have actionable items in that platform. So everything from restarting our services, to doing workflows, to auto generating KV articles for something that it's ingested on and seen a bunch of tickets in the past. So it really takes the idea of AI and not using it as a tool that's going to eliminate headcount. It's going to take the AI and allow it to elevate your headcount, and let your headcount do things that are way more important and what you're paying them for. You don't want them to be doing remedial work, but you also want them to have the tools in front of them and the knowledge in front of them that they could trust. And that's the real differentiator between Ignite and some of the other platforms out there in the market today.
Yaron, I want to double click into a couple of things you said there, because we've had a lot of guests recently on the show weigh in on this bolted on versus built in AI in managed services tool. I mean, at some point, there's only so much you can build within the tool itself. At some point, you still have to connect to other platforms potentially. Or am
Mhm.
I looking at this completely wrong? What's your take?
No, you're absolutely right, and there are certain things that we will bolt onto, and we will have. So there is a marketplace, and there are APIs that are available. But the key with us is that we want to be the source of truth. So, for instance, we don't do backup. We won't do backup because there are unbelievable backup solutions out there that are excellent. Endpoint protection is another one. We won't do that. But if there's something that's happening in your endpoint protection tool, so one of your third parties comes in and says, we see an issue and we want it addressed, that's going to feed into Ignite, and Ignite's going to then triage and understand and escalate and do everything it's supposed to do, and then feed it back into that other tool. The rationale behind that is because everything, if it's sitting within one source of truth, you have true knowledge and true understanding of what's actually happening. So I'm not looking at a different dashboard. I'm not looking at something else. I also am taking that information that I gathered from the third party and entering it into my platform. So once it's in Ignite, now you have that reference data, and now you have that historical data, so you know what's going to happen later on. So yes, there are going to be integrations, there are going to be APIs that you talk to regularly, but the core of it is about how do you make an MSP operate efficiently? And we've seen that. I mean, you guys have walked the trade show floors thousands and thousands of times and seen everything out there. And AI is definitely, a huge component of it, but AI only can operate effectively on what it can see and what it can, actually have context in. And if it's contextually looking at things that are in different spots and in different, platforms, who's right and who's true. And that's where the differentiator stands, is that our platform becomes that source of truth. And like it or not, if it's there, it finds it, it works through it, it catalogs it, it now becomes part of its data set and its knowledge base. And now, once it's in that knowledge base, you can then take that and filter that out and populate that out into other tools that are out there.
So built in versus bolted on, as Eric says, is one of these issues that a lot of people have an opinion on. We've spoken about it on the show before. Another thing that comes up a lot in AI for MSPs right now is human in the loop versus fully or maybe mostly autonomous. Everybody has a perspective on that. What is your take, and how do you approach that in IgnitHQ? But also more sort of philosophically, what's your take on the right degree of autonomy with AI?
Yep. So that's really, and it's dependent on the MSP. So depending on what vertical you're supporting. So for instance, if you're supporting a vertical that is, emergent care or something that is, really critical, there should be some level of human interaction because you don't want AI to make a mistake. But the way we approach it specifically with Ignite is that Ignite requires you to have, for the first few iterations until you are completely comfortable, a human approval. And that human approval is there, and it says for a very specific reason. It says, can the service restart? For instance, you don't want to restart a SQL service in the middle of the day when everyone's accessing the database, right? That's a big problem. Or you don't want to restart, a service that's allowing you to connect to, in the medical space, like an MRI machine or something like that, that is not going to collect the data. But if you are restarting a Prince spooler, that's not a big deal because jobs can then, go back to it. So there is a level of autonomy, but there's also a level of trust that the our AI model has to earn the trust, not it's not given it by default. So once we get to a level of trust and you go through this, and of course you can have, there's also these built-in knowledge packs that we currently have that have been vetted time and time again and looked at. And it says, like, for instance, if you're in the engineering world and AutoCAD needs some certain things, or you're doing something with a CAD CAM machine, or you're doing something in the legal world, like with LexisNexis or whatever, those are generally acceptable, automation rules that you just say, yes, I approve those. Those can go and work. But if you're in an environment that you have concerns about, where you don't want to restart something that could potentially cause bigger outages or bigger network issues, that requires human intervention until the system's built the level of trust. So Duke comes back to us and says, this is what, I recommend. I'm at a highest level of confidence that says this will be okay to do this. Here's my rationale. And that's the other thing too that we do that's different, is every step of our AI is documented and visible. So it's not a black box that's just making a decision. So we say it shows you, this is what is the cause. This is what we think the correction is. This is what we feel the outcome is going to be. And this is the rollback if necessary. Do you approve this? And if it gets to a level of confidence and we set the level of confidence at 92% for every single thing, once it reaches that 92% level of confidence, um, it then goes and automatically approves it. If there are always things that you do not want it to just auto do and just notify you always and have a human intervention, that is built into the platform as well. So you have that level of autonomy to control, to say, I want all these things to happen automatically, or I want somebody to review this, or I want somebody to say, not just review this, I want to make sure that I'm the one who's actually clicking execute because it brought it to me. So you have that full layer of control.
It's interesting that, in the in the evolution of AI that we're in today, Yaron, and kind of all the MSPs trying to figure out, what's the best way for me to adopt it. It's already being kind of integrated in all of my tools. How do I, take this opportunity and help my customers develop it? you know, and some of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt about, what's required in order to take the first couple of steps. We hear a lot of things about, normalizing data, tagging data, things like this, right? And some MSPs just don't have that kind of, programmatic background or thinking about things like that. So for the folks that are still on that journey, you know, how do you define a unified data layer? What goes into to creating something like that out of unstructured data? And
Mhm.
and and we can assume that it's going to improve AI outcomes, but from your take, can you take us just that one level deeper to kind of reveal kind of the inner workings of how all that needs to look in order to make AI as effective as possible?
And if I
Yeah,
could jump in for just 2 seconds there
sure.
before you answer your own part of why I'm eager to hear your response to that is you and I have spoken before. There are other companies out there, we won't name them, but they're saying, "We have a unified data layer," and you're not so sure they do. So what
Right.
is your concept of
Mm,
that?
Yeah.
okay,
So,
thanks. Yeah.
and that's great, and I'm glad you're both directly in the same vein. So, unified data layer is something that is kind of using the description of a car. A car is a car, and it could you can drive, from one place to another. Is it a performance car? Is it a utilitarian vehicle? Is it a people carrier? Whatever it is, it is. But unified data layer is that same thing that a lot of people are describing. Is it really doing everything you expect it to do? So is it contextually aware? So when you take unstructured data and then you feed it into a tool, and you have the tool actually say, okay, I think that it's this. I want to move it and put it into this bucket or this silo or this service board or this RMM remediation or whatever it is. The tool has to be able to understand that. And the tool, especially in the MSP space, there's a lot of products out there that have been built by acquisition. And I'm not saying that they're bad products. There are amazing products out in the market. But for somebody to, either using the tool of, drinking your own Kool-Aid or eating your own dog food or whatever it is, we built it specifically around that because we saw all the challenges. So we've used every tool under the sun over the years. I've been involved in, huge migrations. I've been involved in smaller migrations. I've been involved in trying different tool sets. And the challenge always comes across as what I have in one system is not going to map effectively to the next one. So when I map it and I try to use it, am I going to get real outputs? And is it an output I'm going to trust? So part of the structural part of it is really that data transition has to be done flawlessly. And it has to be done in a way that is trustworthy, and it has to be done in a way that's effective. We all know changing tools is very, very scary. People are locked into multi-year agreements, and they just kind of ride the wave to say, I'm already in this. I figured this out. As great or as terrible as it is, I'm going to be here and use this going forward. Our approach was very different because we didn't have that technical debt, and we said, how can I make a transition from a particular tool, from an incumbent, one of the larger ones, and make it structured enough that during the process I know that when I click over and use this new system, it's going to work. So we took a ton of time to really design that, and it's called a migration in a concierge. It's basically goes through and looks at everything you currently have, maps it, and says, "I think it's going to go here. Is that where you want it to go?" And I'm going to use my AI intelligence to say what I've seen based off other environments and this and that. I'm going to assume it's going to go here, but do you feel like it's really going to go there? So, like, contracts are a great example. Contracts are some people call them contracts, some people call them agreements. Are they all you can eat? Are they you build block tie? Or are they whatever? When you see that, how are you going to decipher that and look at that and say, okay, well, this particular customer is a block time agreement. When I look at them and I'm doing a bill, a bill down the road, is it going to know effectively to up against those hours in block time? If I didn't make sure that migration happened properly, I'm never going to trust that. So it's going to take time from finance. It's going to take time to make sure that the timestamps from the engineers were done properly. So really, that data structure and the idea of taking one platform, looking at it, what it has, normalizing it, and then moving it into the system, that intermediary step is so important because that's the only way you're going to get truth. And by taking the time and having the tool and have the AI actually look at it and say, yes, I'm confident that this will be something that is important and that will move over, great. Like, We see this all the time where we're doing a migration for a very large customer right now, that every one of their, their tickets has some sort of attachment. Either it's a picture of a data closet or a front desk or a picture of a bill for an ISP or something like that. Those all need to come over and those all need to be mapped appropriately. But does that something that needs to happen in the immediate migration? Potentially no. But when the ticket needs to be reviewed down the road, that attachment needs to be readily indexed and capable so the AI can pick that up and understand that. So we want to make sure that that intermediary and that step that's in the middle takes data from an unstructured platform, puts it into a true unified data structure, and then that unified data structure is what's read upon on the outside from Ignite looking into its internal engine.
Another data related issue. This actually came up in an interview Eric and I did even earlier this week. From a data standpoint, a unified data standpoint, the data that an MSP accumulates, that's their data. It's proprietary. It's specific to their business, how they do business, that's their moat. The more of that data they accumulate, the more effective their AI gets because it's learning about their business and how they do things. There is also an argument to be made, though, by a company like yours that there might be some AI benefit from also having access to aggregated, anonymized data from lots of MSPs and just have that big picture of what works and what doesn't work. Do you have a take on the interplay, the balance between keeping the data MSP specific, but also maybe not drawing on this aggregated data?
Absolutely, and that is something that we're very, very clear on because security and privacy and making sure that the data moat is there is very, very important. But you also have that ability to say when you're onboarding and even any data you have down the road, you have the ability to have your anonymized data added to a general LLM library. And that LLM library then, of course, becomes this whole community where other people have access to it. So, for instance, in certain verticals, people may have solved a problem as another MSP who technically is your competitor, but they're not in the same market, right? So they're doing something geographically on the other side of the country. If they solve the problem, that's really important. But you have the ability as an MSP to say, I want to opt in to share my data as long as it's validated and anonymized. And what our platform does is it shows you the anonymized data. So there's no PHI, no PCI, no any identifiable information that would do it, but just literally technical jargon associated. So even IP structures, for instance, those are anonymized. So you're not looking at somebody's individual IP or DNS structure or anything like that. There's a great component to community. And especially in the MSP space, we see community as a great thing. I mean, Reddit and every one of the boards and everything you look out there is saying, how can I learn from my colleagues? Because I'm not the only one who's ever encountered this problem. Or if I am the only one who's encountered this problem, I can help someone else solve this problem. So you have the control of saying, I don't want to do this. I want to lock this down like Fort Knox. Nobody's ever going to see my data. This is strictly for me. That's your control. But there's also the ability to say, I want to take my data and anonymize it and run it through a multi-tiered anonymization engine to validate that there's nothing that can be shared that would identify you as an MSP, your customers, your data structure, anything like that. Really just the resolution. We have the same thing in terms of like script generation. So we have a script library. When you create a script, let's say I want to create a script that adds, users to Active Directory that, it's just easier through the Duke model, just help me create a script and Duke creates it. You have the ability, do I want to publish that? That publishing of that script goes through a vetting process to make sure it's, first of all, not nefarious, it's not malware. It's done initially through AI, and then a human set of eyes looks at it. And then it becomes part of a generic script library that people can access with attribution. So you have that ability to say, I want to share my data because this is a community driven environment. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've reached out to colleagues across the country and asked them a question, or we've been asked questions by other colleagues because we're ultimately here to save, we save each other and make our businesses better. Like, rising tides, raise all boats, right? That's the whole thing. We want to do that, but we also want to be in the spot where if you feel that your data is so proprietary to you, you do not need to take part in that community, and we want you to be comfortable in that mindset.
Is that a unique differentiator, Yaron, of your solution? Because, think of any other industry out there. In the EULA, you sign up and, basically you're giving away, anything you post, your pictures, and, these companies can use it at their desire. So is that something that you're kind of using as a wedge to
Yeah.
attract other folks?
We are, and we're being very open about that. So, like, our EULA is out there, our API structures out there, our data structures out there. We have a whole section that says "prove it," like because we know we're the new kids on the block. Like nobody cares about us, nobody knows us. But when they see, like, why should we go to you? And there's a whole section to be like, oh, you don't believe that we have, a million plus tickets in the database? Query the database. Like you can do that and look at that in real time and understand that. We're not hiding behind an architecture. We're not hiding behind AI. We're not hiding behind anything. We want to be there because we realize that there's great tools out there that are getting better. And if we can set the bar high, other people are going to try to reach that bar and even pass it. And that's a good thing. Competition like that is great. The difference here we have is that we literally took it from the ground up because when we started to build it, the idea was we were going to use it internally because we were tired. And we were tired of the requirement of the tool bloat and everything out there and all the monthly charges and everything associated with it. So from our perspective, it was a win to build it no matter what. When we started to show it to other people and they say, wow, wait a minute, this can actually do what I wanted to do. Like, oh, your live chat, has all the context, history for every ticket associated with it. And I can, not just reference and do self-service stuff, but I can open a new ticket via live chat and have everything in my customer portal. Wow, like that's crazy. I can look at that, or I can, do something. I want to create a training module, for instance. We have a whole training and enablement module, which is, if you have specific onboarding requirements for your employees or even your customers, like you want to go through a checklist, like, all of this stuff is there on purpose because we want people to see that MSP's job is to make sure, the customer that they're serving can do their job. So we're not going to go in there and tell a law firm how to try a case. We're not going to go in there and tell an engineering firm that it should be, Schedule 40 steel is going to see whatever it is, for that. But we also want them to trust us to be like, we want to know that every time you come in the morning, your computers are working flawlessly, your network is there, your data access is there, your remote access is working properly, you're secured, your endpoints are active. And we use the analogy of like the electric company. You don't call the electric company every single day to say thanks for keeping my lights on. You call the electric company when your power's out, and like that's a problem, right? So we want to be the electric company, but we don't want you to have to call. We want Duke to automatically say, hey, this service restarted 3 times. Why? If that service is continuing restarting, there's something going on there. Let's investigate and proactively solve that problem before somebody calls you to complain about that issue.
I love the electric company analogy. If it's okay with you, I'm going to borrow that because you're always
Absolutely.
like, hey, the lights of the power is out, or you got a problem with your bill, right? That's when you
Right.
call. It's not
Exactly.
thanks for all
Yes.
that light.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like, nobody like, and one of the things that MSPs are really good at is giving away things for free, and not documenting it. So like being able to just go in and say, we remediated X number of tickets that you didn't have to call for, or we checked it and make sure and we validated your backup, and here's your backup, and we validated the tool and we did this and that. That's a great thing. And that's something that we're proud of. And we want to show customers. We want the industry to do the same thing because again, the better the competition out there, it's going to raise everyone's game. And it's not going to be like, listen, we know we're going up against enormous, multi-billion dollar companies. That's okay because we're not hiding behind it. We want to prove to you that there is an option out there and you're not stuck anymore. And that's really the driver, is that you have choices, and these choices are not going to put, you under financial duress. They're going to actually help you become more efficient, and you're going to help your colleagues in the industry as well, because now everybody can start helping each other a little more, and you can use AI to do the things you didn't want to have to do yourself. I mean, those components alone, as you read articles every day, AI is doing this and AI is taking a job away here and that. And I don't believe that. I think AI is going to help people become more efficient and have humans have better brains and use their skills to a better degree where they can be utilized, because you're paying the same amount of money for somebody. Well, let AI do the menial things and the things that we're going to take time away from somebody, and let that person interact, have that human connection, and have that trust built with your MSP. And that's really important for us.
So I want to pivot a little bit and talk about security. We earlier in the in this episode, Yaron, we talked about how unified data benefits security. What are your thoughts on the pros and cons of getting security functionality from the same platform as the rest of your stack? There are
Mhm.
have different views on this,
Yeah.
so we'd love to hear your perspective.
So, and from our internal view, there are amazing security tools out there, and we don't want to go out there and say we're going to be the next, end all security tool, because we're not. That's not our core competency. But what we do want to do is take best of breed tools that are out there, absolutely unbelievable tools that are so good at making sure endpoints are protected, protecting against 0 days, protecting against malware, all sorts of things. And we want those tools to feel that they are native in our platform. So that's why we are very particular on our marketplace. Like, we very particular about who's coming into the marketplace, because we want to make sure that they have the same philosophy that we do. And our philosophy is that we're going to do what we can do the best that we absolutely possibly can. If they don't have to worry about like creating a new dashboard or something that's going to be, useful of them, that nobody's going to look at, and at the end of the day, an end user wants to know they're protected. If they can look in our tool or any other tool and say, I can confidently know that my third party security tool is doing its job completely effectively, and here's what it blocked, and here's what it did, and here's how the firewall logs were ingested, and here's what the sim saw. Those are great. Same thing on backup. We want to make sure that backups, like, the greatest thing is like when you know that your backup's there and you can see that, with some of the image-based backups, the boot screen, like, that it's there, or that, you do test backups of, delete a file, restore. Those types of functionality for us are very important, because we want somebody to look and say, I have complete and total faith that this happened, because, luck favors the prepared. So if you're prepared and you're looking at it and you're validating it and you're really going through it, when an issue actually happens, it's not going to really be that much of an issue. You're going to be able to restore, you're going to be able to understand the audit trail, you're going to be able to understand who did what when, even the simple things of like credential management, right? Somebody goes in credential management and they're looking like, I want a full audit log of who changed the password when, did it work, did it, was it effective, do we have to roll back? All those things are really important. So as you look at any function or any action inside any MSP tool, like, auditing should be there as one of the core components of it. And that's something that we're seeing that's really not there. That level of audit capability and that level of visibility, not just in terms of what was done and why it was done, but not just from a human perspective, but from the AI perspective. Like, you can actually see the calls that are happening in AI, its reasoning, why it did it, all the way through the final result, and an undue fashion as well. So we want to make sure security, if something did happen, and like this last week's Patch Tuesday was one of the biggest one. I think it was the biggest one actually that Microsoft ever released. I mean, that's enormous, and that can have huge ripple effects down the road for other software packages. So, in the medical space, for instance, like, there are certain packages that just don't do well with Patch Tuesday. They just don't, and you have to deal with that. So, we want to make sure that we have a tool set that's in there that you're comfortable with. That from a security perspective, you have the visibility, you understand why it's doing it, and you can make an educated decision to say, as you as the business owner, or as the MSP partner, to say, we looked at this and we feel that this will be a risk or this will not be a risk, and we're comfortable moving forward.
So I want to go back to what I sort of hinted at the very beginning of the interview, because you're in an interesting position. You are both a vendor, you're an entrepreneur, you're also an MSP. You have a particular vertical industry focus, which may or may not be relevant to this. turning away from tools for MSPs and looking at AI solutions that the MSPs in our audience can and should be delivering to their customers. What are you doing in your MSP? What are you planning to? How are you kind of thinking about AI services and solutions for the end user?
Yep, it starts with education. So we've seen a ton of tools out there, especially in our vertical. Specifically, we do, dentistry is really the core of our competency, so medical as well. But starts with education. Like you have to know that rogue tools, like going out and just opening up ChatGPT or Claude and doing a letter for referral that talks about specific medical codes and things like that with PII in it. That's an educational issue. So we start there. So when we're talking with customers, we're saying that they want to embed AI, they want to start using it to improve their workflow. We want them to be educated, number one, to say, this is safe, this is not. This is how you should approach it. If you want to use it for proofreading without any PII, no problem. Make sure it's a licensed copy. Make sure you're doing things, you're using the proper SaaS tools. Utilize all the tools you have available to you already. That's the number one thing. So, the number one security problem for years is the human factor, right? So everyone knows that the human factor is a big concern. Once we get past that human factor, what we're doing is looking for the ways to automate the tasks that are not easy to do, and that are time consuming. So, like in our space, insurance authorizations. If we can automate an insurance authorization task where somebody doesn't have to sit there on hold, or somebody can connect logged into a portal and speed up an insurance authorization, that's great. Or even in terms of like engineering, like for sourcing of particular items, using AI to help you source those items. So, for instance, supply chain we know is very challenging right now. Hardware devices are expensive. They're much slower to be received now. Even certain components, like we do some work in the aerospace industry. Um, Getting aerospace type items, so like titanium for milling and certain carbon fibers and things like that. Use the AI in those ways to help you source and become more efficient and build a database that then you can then put that into your tool. And if your tool accepts that and now it becomes the single source of truth again, that in this particular warehouse you have 50 pounds of a 50-pound block of titanium that's ready to be milled, or you have these pre-authorizations already set for this medical procedure, or you have you've provided all these depositions to the court reporter that you needed to do. All those automations that are out there, AI is really, really beneficial for that, because you can then present it, audit it, and make sure it's actually done. So we start with education to make sure that they're not doing something they shouldn't be doing, that's putting them either themselves at risk or their customers, or patients, or their people who are they're selling their services to. And then we take that and move it into the next phase of saying, we've now have this great set of data that you've collected. Now normalize that data and ingest it into your platform. So again, you now have that single source of truth. So you can have jobs that are running scheduled tasks with co-work or whatever, pulling data in, and then looks at it, it normalizes it there, brings it into the platform that you're using. It's not specific to Ignite, it could be any of your other tools, and then make sure that you're following that procedure all the way through. So you're locking down and understanding what the concept is. So there are a lot of really great tools out there. The key is making sure that those tools are using the right set of data from the beginning, and making sure that that data is going to give you the outcome you want, because the outcome you want is accuracy. And accuracy is going to make all the difference. It's going to make your bill when you send it to the customer that much easier for them to understand, because they knew that they were profitable. They are going to understand that their inventory constraints were addressed. They're going to understand that all their deadlines were met. Those types of things for us are really important. So when we look at if a customer wants to use AI, how do they want to use it and what's their end goal? So it's education and a conversation. Like, you need to take that time, because you could put something in a chat and then it just goes down the road and hallucinates and does something, and it takes you down a rabbit hole that you never thought you were going to do. But you can read a room and have a context and a conversation to say, what are you really trying to accomplish? And if you can say, oh, they're trying to accomplish X, Y, and Z, it's much easier to put a solution in place for them that they're trying to accomplish to give them the designated outcome that they're looking for.
I love it, Yaron. All of this has been super interesting. I have a hunch that there are going to be more than a few people in our audience who would, they've got questions for you. They want to talk to you, maybe learn more about IgnitHQ. Where should they go?
Yeah, just visit us at ignitehq.com. There's actually our contact forms go to an actual human being. So there are a couple of people who look at it, and I am one of them. So feel free to email us directly. I can be reached at Yaron at ignitehq.com. That's YARON at ignitehq.com. We answer every question, and we prove it. And that's the thing we want people to ask. It's not about competing. It's about making everyone have a better playing field to play in.
And I probably should have said this at the beginning of the interview. When we say IgnitHQ, that is IGNITHQ, one word. After you learn more about the product, and more about Yaron Baitch, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of MSP Chat.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, and we will see you out on the road, I am quite sure. And you pick up on some of these threads as things evolve. Folks, Eric and I are going to take a quick break right now. When we come back on the other side, we'll share some final thoughts about this conversation with Yaron Baitch. Have a little fun, wrap up the show. Stick around. We are going to be right back. And welcome back to part 3 of this episode of the MSP Chat podcast. And one last thank you to Yaron for making some time for us and engaging in that interesting conversation. 3 quick things. There are a lot of things I could follow up on there. One that just kind of, jumped out at me as we were talking is, ConnectWise and Kaseya in particular are under what I will call newish leadership. Their CEOs have actually been there a little while now, but there's newish leadership there. In both cases, they have re-architected the data layer and kind of leaned into that a little bit. I'm not going to get into the dispute in terms of whose data layer really is unified or isn't, but Yaron is the first person I can think of with no legacy issues whatsoever to consider. Somebody starting from a blank slate in the Gen AI era who basically said, I am going to build an AI-native system of record. What should that look like? And so that's the one thing that I think is unique or close to it about his data layer is there were no issues in terms of existing products or partners or anything to consider. So it's kind of interesting to see what he decided to do, given that he had that kind of freedom from constraints. 2, we hear again these vendors talk about a unified data layer and how at an anonymized aggregated level that's really useful for MSPs. I've never heard somebody connect that value proposition to community before. And I don't know how important that connection is exactly, but I really did kind of like it. I mean, he basically said it's an opt-in thing, but if you share anonymous data with us, you're doing what MSPs have always done. You are sharing with the community and making everybody better. And I thought that was great. And then one thing, and this is kind of a question mark, he has a very pronounced point of view from a business standpoint about security and does it or does it not belong in a suite like his. And again, pointing in particular to ConnectWise and Kaseya, they have a very different point of view about that. They have a security tool set built into their suite. And in the case of Kaseya in particular, I can tell you they're all 100% like focused on AI right now. But Rania Sakar, their CEO, told me just a few months ago when I interviewed her, we're going to get that working, we're going to make that perfect and get MSPs loving it. And then the next thing I'm going to do is work on security because there's a big long-term growth opportunity for Kaseya and security. So I foresee a debate coming maybe a little bit about how important it is or isn't to have a security tool set integrated into these kinds of platforms.
Yeah. I mean, I was tuned into the same things that you just mentioned, Rich. I think on the on the data and the opt-in. I think that's, backstage afterwards, we were chatting with Yaron, and I said, "Hey, that really resonates with us." Especially for me as a former MSP, the MSP community, and rising tide lifts all boats, and that's kind of a very unique and different industry than I've ever been involved in before, and it's something that I really, really enjoy as well. So that really resonated there. And then on the aggregation, his opt-in, I think that's very, very interesting and unique. I'm just wondering, how that he's got to now go collect all of that aggregate data that these other folks have years of, right? The ConnectWise, the Casades, all the folks they have all this data because they've been, in business for many, many years. So I'm just curious about what that catch up looks like for your own. And then on the security thing, we were talking recently on the program about, the potential additional attack vectors when you're using all these kind of, Goldilocks, just right tools. And as MSPs at more mature MSPs, and especially folks in the enterprise, want to pick their best of breed tool for each thing in the stack or that's supporting their organization. And so I'm just curious whether, you know, integrating it into the existing platform as a one tool for everything um has what's how does that impact that decision? Does this outweigh that? Does it create too much single point failure for some MSPs? I mean, Rich, you and I have spoken to many MSPs, that see kind of, an all-in solution as a quick and easy way to standardize. But that then requires every one of their clients to look like this and fit in this box. And you know what? If you're standardizing on that and you're making 70% margin and you're selling these things like hotcakes, it makes it easier to support and grow and build company equity value. Hey, I can't argue against that at all.
Excellent points, particularly the one on data, and that it just gets straight to this issue that comes up over and over again about the power of data, and the more you have, the better. And so we'll see how that plays out. This is an interesting natural experiment in a certain way to see what kind of impact having immediate access to lots of data can play in AI effectiveness. Well, folks, that leaves us with time for just one last thing. And this week it is coming to us from Greece, specifically the city of Larissa in Greece. And this story originates in September 2023 when Storm Daniel ripped through Greece, Bulgaria, Turkey, Libya. It a powerful storm. It destroyed 79 bridges in the region, including one in the city of Larissa. Except that when I say destroyed, this is actually open to debate. Now, this is a bit, if you're watching on YouTube, maybe we can figure out some way to insert this visual. This is a bit of a visual story. You kind of have to see this quote unquote destroyed bridge in Larissa to understand this story fully, because it's still there. It's just, you can imagine sort of a V in the middle where it partially collapsed. You wouldn't really think people would be maybe using that bridge, but they are. They're still driving across it. And why, Eric? Because it is still the shortest route between 2 points. That is the shortcut, and people will not give it up, even if it means driving over a bridge that looks like it could fall apart at any moment.
Yeah, I'm looking at the picture. I mean, we can at least post the link to what we're looking at here, Rich. And it's, yeah, the bridge has buckled in the middle between the two supports on either side. It's over water, and the middle of the bridge looks like it's touching the water. And so there's this dip. It's got to be 40 degrees, and there's a picture of a car go down into that dip. And yeah, you're rolling the dice, folks. I mean, I don't think shaving a few minutes off your commute is worth, potentially losing your life or the life of your loved ones. That's crazy.
And it is also all we have time for with you this week. Thank you very much for joining us, folks. Eric and I are going to be back in a week's time with another episode of MSP Chat for you. Until then, I will just remind you this is both a video and an audio podcast, which means that if you're listening to us right now but would like to check us out on video, you can go to YouTube. You're going to find us there if you're watching us on YouTube. But you're into audio podcasts, go to Spotify, Google, Apple, wherever you get your audio podcasts. You're going to find us there too. And wherever you do find us, please subscribe, rate, review. It really will help other people find and enjoy the show just like you. This show is produced by the great Rowie Simpson, part of the team with us here at MSP, Channel Master, where we work with vendors to help them build, grow, optimize thriving MSP channels. You can learn more about the many, many ways we do that at www.channelmastered.com. Channel Mastered has a sister organization called MSP Master that Eric and his team working with MSPs to help them grow and optimize their business. You can learn more about that at www.mspmaster.com. So once again, we thank you for joining us. We'll see you in a week. Until then, folks, please remember, as we always ask you to, you can't spell channel without MSP.